Hello friends, I am Shivaji Bhaskar, Faculty of Russian at the School of Foreign Languages, IGNOU. I welcome you all to this course, Basics of Russian Communication Skills Part 1. As you know that we have been discussing about various aspects of the Russian. We have been discussing about the Russian alphabet, its letters, and then we have also seen that when combined together or individually, the sound pattern, tone and texture of the language. We have been learning about various aspects of the Russian language with the help of various forms of sentences. We have done sentences in a simpler manner like simple sentences as well as interrogative and affirmative. We have seen the use of da and niet. For a while we have also seen the usage of patterns like possessive pronouns. We have also seen the usage of certain aspects of the case system in Russian with a few examples which indicates that how rich Russian language is. Now in this module we will be discussing about the verbs. As you know that verbs play a very important role in the formation of any sentence. Since in Russian we have a huge variety of verbs and as per the ending we define them. Since Russian verbs needs to be conjugated, we will also be discussing about their ending as well as the technique how to conjugate them. So, I hope that all of you are very eager to learn about the verbs which play a very important role in Russian language. We will be seeing that how these verbs are being conjugated. So, let us see the first verb here we have. The first one is завтракать. The second one is играть and the third one is повторять. As you already know the meaning of завтракать, играть and повторять as we have seen in our previous module. Завтракать means to have breakfast, играть means to play and повторять means to repeat. If you pay attention to the personal pronouns which we have indicated with я, ты, он, она, мы, вы and они. Since whenever you are conjugating the verb, you have to follow the instructions as given in the personal pronouns and accordingly it will be conjugated and the meaning which will come is I, then the conjugation of the verb, you, he, she, мы, we and они, which means we, you and they. So, please pay attention while I will conjugate the verbs for you. Я завтракаю, ты завтракаешь, он, она завтракает, мы завтракаем, вы завтракаете, они завтракают. So, we have these kind of patterns in the verbs which ends with the and soft sign. But this is a pattern where it little bit changes when we have certain other forms of verbs. We will be discussing about such other verbs which we use in Russian language in a dedicated module. But here let us pay attention to the rest of the two verbs. The second one is играть. Please pay attention to the pronunciation and the technique how do we conjugate the verb. Я играю, ты играешь, он, она играет, мы играем, вы играете and они играют. So, it is absolutely similar to the conjugation we have just seen in the form of завтракать. Now, let us pay attention to the third one. The third one is повторять. As you already know, the meaning of повторять is to repeat. So, please pay attention to the pronunciation and the technique how I am going to conjugate the verb повторять for you. Я повторяю, ты повторяешь, он, она повторяет, мы повторяем, вы повторяете, они повторяют. So, there is a very slight change because the ending of the verb завтракать, играть, they are similar, t and soft sign, whereas in повторять the ending is ya, t and soft sign. So that is why when we see the pronunciation, let's compare Zaftragach and Paftaryach. Ya Zaftrakayu, whereas in case of Paftaryach, Ya Paftaryayu. Okay, whereas in second case, Tui Zaftrakash. In case of Paftaryach, it is Paftaryayesh. And likewise, in Ani, it is Ani Zaftrakayu, and in Paftaryach, it is Paftaryayut. So you have to keep in mind the pattern, the construction, and overall meaning, so that you understand and distinguish between the verbs, especially when writing them, as well as when using them in your communication. So let's look at the meaning of these constructions. For example, Zaftragach. Ya, as you already know, means I, and Zaftragach means to have breakfast or to eat breakfast. Alright, so Ya Zaftragayu, I eat breakfast. Tui Zaftragash, you eat breakfast. On Ana Zaftragay, he or she eats breakfast or to have breakfast. Depending upon the context, you can change. Mui Zaftragay, we have breakfast. We Zaftragay, you have breakfast. Ani Zaftragayu, they have breakfast. Then you have Ya Igrayu. Igraj, we already know, means to play. I play. Tui Igrash, you play. On Ana Igrayet, he or she plays. Mui Igrayem, we play. We Igrayche, you play. And Ani Igrayet, they play. Okay, for example, if I want to use they play football, Ani Igrayut wo football. Okay, so likewise you can also change, and now we are going to see how we change Paftaryach. Ya Paftaryayu, I repeat. Ti Paftaryach, you repeat. And on Ana Paftaryayat, he or she repeats. Mui Paftaryayam, we repeat. We Paftaryayche, you repeat. And Ani Paftaryayut, they repeat. So in such cases where the conjugations are very similar but however little bit different, you can also keep that in mind, note them down in a notebook and use it efficiently while communicating with your family and friends. And you can also make numerous other exercises based on these conjugations and putting the noun and different situations, so that you have a variety of different sentences, but you will be having only these three verb conjugations. So let's go ahead and look at a few more such examples. As you already know that we have certain verbs like Zaftragach, Abhyadach, Ujinach, which we did in our last module, are being used again. Now let's pay attention to the other verbs which we have, like Sprashivach, Znach, Rabotach, Adikhach. So if you pay attention to the ending of these in these verbs, you will see similarity. Zaftragach ends with a, ta and soft sign. Likewise, Abhyadach, Ujnach, Sprashivach, Znach, Rabotach, and Adikhach. What does it mean? It actually means that all of them will be conjugated in a similar fashion. Let's see how. Let's go to the next part and pay attention to the verbs conjugations. Here, before we conjugate, there is another important concept of the genders in Russian, like we have very briefly discussed in our previous modules. We have masculine, feminine, and neuter gender. And depending upon the ending of the noun, we define its gender. For example, you have dom, rabota, akno. The first one, dom, ends with a hard ending, so it belongs to masculine gender. Rabota ends with a, so it naturally belongs to the feminine gender, and akno ends with o, so it belongs to neuter. So as per rules of the Russian grammar, we have hard ending words, masculine gender. Words which ends with a, ya, they are feminine, and words with o and ye are of neuter gender, but not necessarily always, because in Russian we also have exceptions. But we will be discussing about exceptions in a dedicated module. So till then we have to focus on these important aspects of the Russian grammar, where we will find numerous such examples and we can very easily identify them based on their ending. Alright, now let's go to the previous part once again and pay attention to the ending of these verbs. So I quickly going to conjugate these verbs for you. Please pay attention. Since we have already done завтракать, обедать, ужинать, I will be conjugating them quickly. So please pay attention. Завтракать, я завтракаю, ты завтракаешь, он, она завтракает, мы завтракаем, вы завтракаете, они завтракают. Обедать, я обедаю, ты обедаешь, он, она обедает, мы обедаем, вы обедаете, они обедают. Ужинать, я ужинаю, ты ужинаешь, он, она ужинает, мы ужинаем, вы ужинаете, они ужинают. Спрашивать, я спрашиваю, ты спрашиваешь, он, она спрашивает, мы спрашиваем, вы спрашиваете, они спрашивают. Знать, работать, отдыхать can also be conjugated like in a similar fashion, like знать. Я знаю, ты знаешь, он, она знает, мы знаем, вы знаете, они знают. Работать, я работаю, ты работаешь, он, она работает, мы работаем, вы работаете, они работают. And отдыхать we have already did in our previous module. Now I'll do it once again for you. Отдыхать, я отдыхаю, ты отдыхаешь, он, она отдыхает, мы отдыхаем, вы отдыхаете, and они отдыхают. So here you have seen very clearly that how the ending of these verbs are similar, as well as once they are similar, so they are conjugated in a similar fashion. So as a rule which you have just learned, please pay attention to the ending of these verbs and try to conjugate them. And since all of them means differently, so based on the situation, based on the context, use the verbs, make your own sentences and try to communicate. Alright, so now let's go ahead and pay attention to these words. We have defined all these words depending upon their gender. For convenience, please pay attention to them and note them down in your notebook so that you can also make your small sentences based on the gender. And however, we will be discussing about the adjectives in a dedicated module, how to change these adjective endings depending upon the nouns ending and gender. So before that, let's quickly learn the meaning of these simple but different words. Though I am going to read the masculine first. Дом, друг, брат, город, шкаф, магазин, журнал, карандаш, and costume. Alright, so now we will pay attention to these words as per their ending, and since they belong to masculine, feminine and neuter, where ending plays a very important role as per the rules of Russian grammar. So as we already know that words which ends with hard ending are masculine gender words. Words which ends with a, ya, they are feminine gender words, and the words which ends with o and ye, they belong to neuter. So now let's pay attention to these words. First I am going to read the masculine gender words for you so that you can pay attention to the words and note them down also for your own use while you make your own sentences. So the masculine words are dom, drug, brat, город, шкаф, magazine, журнал, карандаш, and costume. Now let's pay attention to the feminine gender words. Работа, pagoda, bumaga, ошибка, машина, студентка, родина, бабушка. And now let's pay attention to the neuter gender words. We have окно, небо, лето, пальто, письмо, яблоко, радио, облако, and море. Now let's understand the meaning of some of the words like dom, you already know, house, drug means friend, brat means brother, gorod means city. Then you have magazine, journal, karandash, etc. So magazine, again a very important word, means shop, journal, journal, karandash, pencil. And now let's pay attention to some of the words in feminine gender words and know their meaning. For example, like rabota means work, pagoda you already know means weather, bumaga means paper, ashipka is mistake, machina is very important again, car, studentka as we already discussed that for male student we have student, but for female it is studentka. And we have rodina and babushka. Rodina is the motherland, babushka is the grandmother. Now let's pay attention to the neuter. Let's learn the meaning of some of the words here. Akno you already know, window, neba is sky, leta is summer. Likewise we have seen many other words already in the previous modules like pismo, yablaka. Pismo is letter, yablaka is apple, radio you already know, it's radio. So my recommendation to you all once again is that please note down all the words and have a habit of looking the meaning of these words in dictionaries as well as use them in your sentences, use them in your communication every day, so that with the help of these almost words in a vocabulary of around 100-200 words so far, you will be able to make your own sentences, whereas while doing this exercise of making sentences while using all the words, some of the verbs, some of the styles, some of the text we just did, you will find yourself in a position where you not only know the concept, the basics of Russian, but as well as you will find yourself that a thought is being processed and developed in Russian, so that while communicating with anybody who already knows Russian, you will be able to not only communicate in basic Russian, but as well as you will have a habit, you will develop a habit of having more meaningful conversation. So let's go ahead and learn the meaning of a few more words now. So I'm going to read the masculine, feminine and neuter gender words like we just did. So the masculine gender words here we have are вопрос, билет, студент, alphabet and aspirant. Then in the feminine gender words we have бумага, девушка, гора, нога, аудитория, статья, India and Russia. So here you have seen the meaning, the construction of some of the words. Now let's pay attention to the neuter gender words. Поле, горе, здание, упражнение and задание. I would like to bring your attention to some of the words which are very important as far as pronunciation is concerned. For example, in the feminine gender words we have gara, naga, whereas we have vowel o after letter g, r and a. So the pronunciation is coming as gara. In naga also we have a vowel o, but the stress is on a, that is why the pronunciation is naga. Alright, so you have to pay attention and keep this aspect in your mind very clearly in order to pronounce them properly. Then we have India and Russia. India is India and Russia is Russia. Then in the neuter gender, there are two words which are very similar. If you don't pay attention to their exact pronunciation, they might be confusing. But since we already have talked about the role of stress or udarenie, so please pay attention to two words. I am going to read for you from the neuter gender. First one is zdanie, which means building, whereas the other word zadanie. So in this, zadanie is task or kind of a work which oftenly used with homework. Damashnie zadanie, homework. So these kind of things you have to be very careful while using these words in your conversation, because sometimes you might find them similar, having the same pronunciation, because if you don't pay attention to the udarenie. Alright, so now let's go ahead and learn about certain principle, certain concept of Russian. So the first one is the gender of a noun is decided by its singular form ending. Always any noun, whether they belongs to any gender, it has to be defined by in a singular form. For example, if I am saying chilavek, so chilavek singular, masculine gender. But when it is plural, luji, it's plural, no gender. Okay, so singular. Kniga, feminine gender. Knigi, no gender because it's plural, so kniga. And likewise you have neuter gender. Okay, akna for example. So akna plural, but akno is neuter gender singular. So likewise you have to keep this aspect in mind. Then the next one, Russian singular nouns having a hard consonant at the end of the masculine gender. So this is a concept very clear that any word which ends with a hard ending is masculine gender. Then nouns ending in a, ya or iya are normally of feminine gender. For example, kniga ends with a, stachia ends with ya, and auditoria ends with iya. So they all belong to feminine gender. And then nouns ending in o, ye and iye are of neuter gender. So it's already clear to you, like akno, more, and then we have done zdanie. Alright, these are the examples of the neuter gender. So this concept has to be very clear while attempting any conversation or writing Russian, so that you already know that this particular word in singular form belongs to which gender. So please keep this aspect in your mind. Let's go ahead and pay attention to the certain aspects. Now I am going to tell you about how to make sentences with adjective. So adjective and noun endings are always in agreement. What does it mean? That by the ending of the noun, the ending of the adjective can be defined. Alright, so in this case, for example, if we pay attention to the masculine, stole, the word is stole. So according to the ending of the word stole, the ending of the adjective would be defined. For example, we have novi stole. And if I want to use novi in form of a feminine gender, then the word has to be of feminine gender. In this case, we have kniga. So novaya kniga. And if I have to try it in the neuter gender, then I have to have a word of neuter gender. In this case, I have akno. So novaya akno. Likewise, we have gorad, dom, theatre, costume. And if you pay attention to the feminine, we have rubashka, mashina, auditoria, bumaga. And in the neuter gender, we have akno, slova, more, zdanie, nieba. So likewise, you can also pay attention to all these words and make your own sentences. But before that, please pay attention to the ending of that word and confirm it. You can also have a habit of looking at the dictionary so that you exactly know the meaning of the word as well as its gender, plus the use of adjective. So it should make sense. So novi stol, stari gorod, stara rubashka, krasne more, большое здание. These all are certain small sentences you can make which are making sense. Alright, for example, krasne more, Red Sea. Alright, we all know. And then Bolshoi Theater, which is very popular theater in Russia, the Bolshoi Theater, okay, very famous for ballet. And then we have many more such concepts which exist, and that is why whenever we are using, it has to be very precise. Alright, now let's go ahead and pay attention to some of the more constructions we have in masculine gender. Маленький зал, русский язык, последний день, синий карандаш. In feminine gender we have маленькая статья, русская зима, последняя статья, синяя стена. Whereas in neuter gender we have маленькое пальто, русская села, последнее задание, and синее окно. So you can also make your own sentences and change them accordingly. Use any word, use any very regular word and change the gender, like in the case last one, sinni karandash, sinnya stena, sinna akno. Blue pencil, blue wall and blue window. So like this you can also change. Alright, but please keep in mind that whenever you are constructing a sentence, it should make sense. Alright, now let's go ahead and remember some of the more important aspects of Russian grammar. Please remember the ending of masculine singular forms of adjective usually uy e kratki, oi e kratki and e kratki. These are the three basic forms, the endings of adjective in masculine gender. Uy e kratki, o e kratki, e kratki. Then the form of adjectives usually ends with aya, yaya are the ending of feminine gender, and in neuter we have o ye and ye, and these are the forms which you only use in adjective endings, not in the noun endings. So don't get confused, make it very clear, please note them down, use it regularly, revise it many more times and then use. So let's go back to the previous part. Here you can see the adjective endings, alright, like ruski, последний, in feminine gender ruskaya, последняя, in neuter gender we have ruskaya, последнее ye. So like this. Okay, now let's go ahead. As we already discussed about the endings of the adjectives and the adjective of the nouns depending upon their genders as they qualify. Now a very important aspect I am going to talk about is the gender of and number of the noun determines the form of the qualifying adjective. What does it mean? It means that if the noun is masculine singular, the qualifying adjective also takes the masculine singular form. Alright, if the noun is in singular form, adjective would remain, it must be in singular form. It cannot be plural. Alright, so as a concept, please keep it in mind. Now, in case of feminine or neuter, it would also be the same. For example, in feminine, if the noun is in a singular form, adjective remains in singular. In neuter, it also similar, like if the noun is in singular, adjective would also remains in singular. Okay, all right. Now, here we are going to have a conversation, a form of a dialogue. As you know that in Russian, having a dialogue, conversation is very important in order to understand and start the communication with the other. It is important as well as it is very constructive in the form that it helps you to understand the situation of the other. So with your family, with your friends, you can also have and initiate such kind of dialogues so that you understand Russian in a more efficient manner. So I am going to talk about these expressions in a dialogue form. Как вас зовут? Меня зовут. So let's have one Russian and one Indian name. Как вас зовут? if Anton is asking Anil, Anton is asking Kak was zavut, Minya zavut Anil, and then Anil can also ask Anton Kak was zavut, then Anton would answer Minya zavut Anton. Then the second expression Kak его зовут. Suppose they have a friend who is asking about Anil, Kak его зовут, what is his name? Then Anton can say его зовут Anil. So likewise you can have numerous examples. So you can also make your own sentences. Now let's pay attention to the next. What is his name? Kak его зовут. His name is Ivan in this case, since we have used Ivan, его зовут Ivan. Now the next one is Kak ее зовут. So in place of его, what is his? Now we are changing into her. What is her name? Kak ее зовут. Kak ее зовут. Ее зовут Anna. Her name is Anna. This can also be used since Anna is a very popular Russian name of females in all around. So you can also use Anna in your own conversations. You can also replace it with, of course, Indian names in the form of dialogue. And now the last one is what is their name? Kak их зовут. Then the answer is их зовут Ashok и Marina. So here you can also use other words, other names, and have this kind of dialogue as well. Now as you know that we have been discussing about several other aspects of Russian. We have discussed about grammar aspects, phonetics as well, but since in foreign languages it is equally important to understand all the four components of the language, that is reading, writing, listening and speaking. So we have been focusing on the alphabet, its sound, how to write them in capital and small, as well as other concepts where we have discussed. And since we already now discussing about the gender in Russian language, verbs and their conjugations, and now in the next module we will be discussing about various other sentences where we will be using the conjugation. So in this case here I hope that you enjoyed learning Russian, making simple sentences and the words based on their gender, using the adjective as per the form of the noun and using it in your day-to-day communication. Thank you very much.